David stepped off the shuttle, his gaze sweeping across the bustling interstellar trade hub. Everywhere he looked, creatures of every conceivable shape and size mingled, bartered, and interacted in dozens of languages, some spoken, some not. The air was a cacophony of sounds and a kaleidoscope of colors that dazzled the senses. He adjusted his translator device, a sleek piece of technology nestled in his ear. As he walked through the crowd, he overheard snippets of conversations, trading deals, and occasional laughter, a universal sign of joy that needed no translation. At a small stall, David paused to examine an array of exotic fruits, their skins shimmering with a metallic sheen. The vendor, a tall being with iridescent scales, noticed his interest. "First time seeing Glothian berries?" the vendor asked, its voice a pleasant hum modulated by the translator. "Yes," David replied, picking up a berry to inspect it. "I'm David, by the way. Pleasure to meet you, David." "I'm Threx," the vendor said, extending a limb in what David assumed was a gesture of greeting. He took it, shaking gently. "Those are quite popular. Tastes like a mix of peach and starlight, or so I'm told." David chuckled. "I'll take a few." Always eager to try new things. He exchanged some credits and pocketed the berries. "I'm here to study and learn about different cultures. Any recommendations on where to start?" "Ah, a scholar then." Threx's eyes glinted with interest. "You should visit the Central Pavilion. Many like you gather there. But if you seek something truly unique, look for the Illyrians. They're elusive but fascinating." "Thank you, Threx. I'll do that." With a friendly nod, he continued on, snacking on a Glothian berry. The taste was as marvelous as promised, a sweet burst of flavors he couldn't quite place. Navigating through the crowd, David made his way to the Central Pavilion. As he entered, his eyes caught a figure standing alone, her appearance strikingly different from the others. She had a sleek, angular face and eyes that reflected the light with a depth that seemed almost liquid. Her skin was a smooth gradient from soft lavender to a deep violet at her extremities. Curiosity piqued, David approached her. "Hello," he said, smiling. "I'm David. I couldn't help but notice you standing here all by yourself." She turned to face him, her expression unreadable at first. Then, a small smile curved her lips. "Greetings, David. I am Inara," she replied, her voice melodic and soothing. "I am observing." "Observing?" David echoed, intrigued. "Yes. I study interactions, behaviors, emotions," Inara explained. "Your species is quite fascinating. You express so much on your faces." David laughed lightly. "We do wear our hearts on our sleeves, as they say. And what have you learned about us so far?" "That you are complex, driven by a myriad of desires and fears," she said. "And you are seekers of knowledge, much like myself." "That's a fair assessment," David admitted. "Speaking of seeking knowledge, I'm here to learn about your culture among others. Maybe you could help me?" Inara considered this for a moment, then nodded. "I can share my observations. It would be beneficial to exchange knowledge directly." They found a quiet corner, and as they sat, David pulled out a small recording device. "Do you mind if I record our conversation? For my studies?" "Not at all," Inara replied. "What would you like to know first?" David thought for a moment. "Tell me about your planet. What is it like?" As Inara began to describe her world, a planet of vast oceans and floating cities, David listened intently, his mind alive with images of alien seas under a foreign sun. This was just the beginning, he knew, of an enlightening journey into the unknown. David and Inara sat across from each other at a small, circular table designed in the minimalist style typical of the trade hub. An array of digital documents, holograms really, floated between them, displaying various linguistic symbols and cultural norms of Inara's people. "I've noticed," David began, gesturing to the holograms, "that your language involves a lot of physical movement. It's almost like a dance." Inara nodded, her eyes lighting up with interest. "Yes, it is very much so. Our communication is as much about the movement as the words themselves. The context of a gesture can completely change the meaning of a phrase." "Could you give me an example?" David asked, genuinely curious. "Certainly," Inara replied. She stood up, her movements graceful and fluid. "For instance, this," she slowly raised her arms, then let them fall softly to her sides, "can mean a traditional greeting, depending on the context of the encounter." David watched, fascinated. "And in a different context? In a more formal setting, the same movement might be considered a solemn farewell." Inara reseated herself, her posture relaxed yet dignified. "That's fascinating," David said, making notes on his tablet. It must require a great deal of attention to understand each other properly. It does, Inara agreed. Much like your human languages require understanding of tone and inflection. They continued this way for a while, Inara demonstrating various gestures and David attempting to mimic them, occasionally eliciting a gentle correction or a laugh from Inara. As they paused for a moment, a new figure approached their table, a man with the robust build of a seasoned traveler, his skin weathered from many suns. "David, I thought that was you," he exclaimed, a broad smile splitting his face. "And who is this?" David stood to greet him. "Marcus. I didn't expect to see you out here. This is Inara, she's teaching me about her culture." "Pleasure to meet you, Inara." Marcus extended his hand, then quickly withdrew it, remembering the customs might be different. "Sorry, I'm not sure about the proper greeting." Inara smiled, gently mimicking the gesture she had shown David earlier. "This is how we greet in my culture," she explained, performing the graceful arm movement. "Beautiful," Marcus said, trying to replicate the motion, a bit clumsily. "I'm here on trade, but I always have time for a chat. What are you two working on?" David explained their cultural exchange, and Marcus listened intently, nodding along. "I've always found the nuances of alien languages to be a challenge, but hearing about this makes it seem more like an art form." "It is, in many ways," Inara said. "Would you like to join us? The more perspectives we have, the richer the conversation." Marcus agreed enthusiastically and pulled up a chair. As the conversation turned to a discussion of trade languages and their variations across different species, David realized he was witnessing the merging of not just two but multiple cultural perspectives. The afternoon faded into evening as they shared stories and insights, the table a microcosm of the broader cultural mosaic of the galaxy. David's initial project of understanding Inara's culture deepened into a broader exploration of interstellar communication and friendship, revealing once more the boundless potential of shared knowledge and mutual curiosity. David and Marcus, along with Inara, decided to spend the day exploring the bustling marketplaces and cultural sites of the trade hub. The vibrant thrum of activity enveloped them as they wandered through crowded streets, each turn and alley offering new sights and sounds. "Look at that." Marcus pointed to a towering sculpture made from what appeared to be shimmering light, but on closer inspection, was a clever arrangement of thin, reflective metal. "Is that typical in your culture, Inara?" Inara, who had been quietly observing the humans' reactions to her world, turned to the sculpture. "Not exactly from my world, but it's a common artistic expression in the Doric sector. They use light and reflection to represent the fluidity of life." "Fascinating," David mused, taking pictures with his device. "It's interesting to see how different cultures use different mediums to express similar themes." As they moved on, a street performer caught their attention, juggling glowing orbs that changed colors as they moved through the air. The performer, noticing their interest, threw an orb slightly towards them, making it hover in front of Marcus, who laughed and tried to touch it, only to have it zip away at the last second. "This place never ceases to amaze," Marcus grinned. "Every corner has a surprise." They continued their tour, visiting a local eatery that Inara recommended. Inside, the aroma of exotic spices filled the air. They ordered a variety of dishes, each presenting a range of flavors and textures that were entirely new to the human palate. As they ate, David brought up their earlier conversation. "Inara, you mentioned yesterday about the importance of understanding emotions and behaviors in your studies. How does that play into your daily life?" Inara took a moment to formulate her response, choosing her words carefully. "We believe that understanding the emotional currents of an interaction helps us better navigate our social structures. It's not just about survival, it's about thriving through a deeper connection with others." "That's a beautiful way to put it," Marcus said, nodding thoughtfully. "It makes me think about how often we might misinterpret actions or intentions on Earth because we don't understand the underlying emotions." "Exactly," Inara agreed. "And it's why I find human expressions so intriguing. You are very direct in some ways, but there's a complexity beneath that directness." Their meal continued with discussions on various cultural norms and practices, each sharing stories from their own worlds. After the meal, they visited a cultural history museum where artifacts from hundreds of civilizations were preserved and displayed. As they walked through the exhibits, David stopped in front of a display case containing ancient manuscripts and digital relics. Seeing all this, it's clear that despite our differences, there's a common thread that connects all civilizations: the need to communicate, to record history, to express ourselves. Marcus nodded. "It makes you appreciate the diversity out here. Each culture adds something unique to the galaxy." Inara smiled, watching the humans engage so earnestly with her culture and others. "Would you like to see something truly unique to my people?" she asked, a hint of pride in her voice. Of course, both men responded eagerly. Leading them to a secluded section of the museum, Inara introduced them to a virtual reality experience designed to simulate Illyrian emotional communication. David and Marcus took turns experiencing worlds constructed from emotions, each landscape changing with the feelings they evoked. As they left the museum, the sun was setting, casting long shadows over the hub. "Today was incredible," David said, genuinely grateful. "Thank you for sharing your world with us, Inara." "And thank you both for being open to learning about it," Inara replied. "It's been enlightening for me as well." The trio agreed to meet again the next day, each pondering the new insights they had gained. As they parted ways, the stars began to appear, a reminder of the vastness of space and the endless possibilities it held for friendship and understanding. Inara had invited David to her home, an elegantly constructed dwelling that blended organic curves with high-tech amenities, typical of her planet's architectural style. The evening was warm, with a gentle breeze that carried the scent of exotic flowers. David arrived with a small gift, a book of Earth's landscapes, a gesture of goodwill and cultural sharing. Inara greeted him at the door, her expression one of genuine delight. "David, welcome. This is a lovely gift. Come, I have prepared dinner." As they entered the dining area, David was struck by the panoramic views of the cityscape through the transparent walls. The table was set with an array of dishes, each more intriguing than the last. "I hope you're hungry," Inara said, leading him to the table. "I've prepared some traditional dishes, as well as a few that are suited to human tastes." David smiled appreciatively. "It looks incredible, Inara. Thank you for doing this." They began to eat, and the conversation flowed easily. David was curious about every dish, and Inara was more than happy to explain the ingredients and preparation methods. As an anthropologist, David started, his interest piqued by the complexity of the flavors. "I find food to be a profound way to connect with a culture. It's much more than sustenance, it's history, it's art, it's community." Inara nodded, pleased. "Exactly. Meals are where we share our stories, our successes, and sometimes even our secrets." The mention of secrets seemed to hang in the air for a moment, and David decided to delve deeper. "Inara, if you don't mind me asking, what's something about your culture that outsiders rarely understand?" Inara thought for a moment, then replied, "Many see us as reserved, maybe even secretive. But in our own way, we are deeply emotional. Our privacy isn't about secrecy but about choosing the right moment and the right person to share with." David listened intently, realizing this was one of those moments Inara had chosen to share with him. "That makes a lot of sense," he said. "It's about trust." "Yes, trust," she affirmed, then turned the conversation back to David. "And what about you? What's something about Earth that might surprise me?" David chuckled. "Well, despite our love for technology and progress, there's a growing movement of people who advocate for returning to simpler, more sustainable ways of living. It's a balance, or a struggle, depending on who you ask." Their meal continued with more personal stories and cultural insights. After they finished, Inara suggested they move to a smaller sitting area where the lights of the city created a backdrop that felt almost magical. "David, I have a question," Inara said as they settled into the comfortable chairs. "In your studies, have you ever felt that you lost a part of yourself in trying to understand others?" David pondered the question. "Sometimes, yes. It's easy to get so caught up in observing and adapting that you forget what grounds you. But I also believe that each culture I study adds to my understanding of the world, and myself." Inara listened, her eyes reflecting the city lights. "I've felt the same. Each interaction teaches me something new, even tonight." The conversation shifted to lighter topics, laughter mingling with the deeper connections being forged. As the evening drew to a close, David felt a profound sense of gratitude and connection. "Inara, tonight was enlightening. Thank you for sharing so much with me." "It was my pleasure, David," Inara responded, her smile warm. "I'm glad we could share this time together." As David left, the cool night air felt invigorating, his mind alive with new ideas and perspectives. It was clear that this night had deepened their friendship, opening doors to further exploration and understanding. David and Inara had planned to explore the outskirts of the city, where the architecture gradually gave way to the natural landscapes of Inara's home planet. The air was cooler here, tinged with the fresh, earthy scent of alien flora. "Out here," Inara began as they walked along a winding path bordered by luminescent plants, "we can see a different side of our culture, one that's closer to nature." David looked around, his eyes wide with fascination. "It's beautiful. On Earth, many people seek out nature for peace and inspiration. It seems universal. They continued in silence for a while, each step bringing a new sight or sound. Eventually, they reached a clearing where the light from the planet's twin suns filtered through a high canopy, casting patterns on the ground. "This looks like a perfect spot," David remarked. "Yes, it is," Inara agreed. "I brought you here for a reason. I want to show you one of our traditional dances. It's a form of meditation and communication." David was intrigued. "Dance as communication? That sounds fascinating." Inara nodded and stepped into the center of the clearing. "Watch carefully," she instructed as she began to move. Her movements were fluid and graceful, each motion flowing seamlessly into the next. David watched intently, trying to discern the subtle meanings in her dance. After a few moments, she paused and approached him. "Now, you try. I'll guide you." David felt a bit clumsy at first, his movements awkward compared to Inara's elegance. But with her gentle coaching, he began to understand the rhythm and flow. "The dance tells a story," Inara explained as they moved together, "about the cycles of our lives, the seasons of our planet, and the connections between all living things." As they danced, another figure appeared on the path. It was Marcus, who had been invited to join them later in the day. He watched them for a moment before calling out, "Looks like I'm just in time for the lesson." David and Inara stopped and laughed as Marcus approached. "We're learning one of Inara's traditional dances," David explained. "It's harder than it looks." "I'd like to give it a try," Marcus said with a grin. "Teach me, too?" Inara smiled warmly. "Of course. Let's start from the beginning." The three of them spent the next hour in the clearing, Inara patiently teaching them the dance. Marcus, much to his own surprise, found a rhythm that almost matched Inara's. As the suns began to set, casting a golden glow over the landscape, they finally rested, sitting on the soft, mossy ground. "That was incredible," Marcus said, breathing heavily. "It's not just dance, it's like a way of seeing the world." "Yes," Inara agreed. "It's about feeling the connection to everything around you." David looked between his two friends, feeling a deep sense of camaraderie. Today was more than just learning steps. It was about understanding each other better. They sat for a while longer, talking and laughing as the sky darkened and the first stars appeared. Eventually, they made their way back to the city, their steps light and easy with the shared experience of the day. The dance had started as a curiosity, a simple desire to share part of Inara's culture. But as they returned to the bright lights of the city, it was clear that it had become something more, a bridge between worlds, and between friends. The evening had set in, bringing a cooler breeze through David's quarters where he and Inara had agreed to meet to discuss their next cultural exchange. The room was softly lit, creating a calm, inviting atmosphere. Inara was first to speak, her tone a mixture of curiosity and hesitation. "David, through our exchanges, I've learned much about human culture, but I find myself curious about more personal aspects." David, who had been arranging some snacks on a table, looked up, a slight flush on his cheeks. "Personal aspects? Like relationships?" "Yes," Inara nodded. "In my culture, understanding personal and intimate relationships is crucial. They're viewed as another layer of connection, equally important as any other." David took a moment before responding, "I think humans share that view, though perhaps we're not always as open about it. There's a lot of variation depending on personal beliefs and cultural backgrounds." Inara moved closer, her voice soft. "Could you show me? I mean, could we explore this aspect together? It's not just academic interest." David cut her off gently. "Inara, are you asking about physical intimacy?" "Yes, I am," Inara confirmed, her gaze steady. "I wish to understand the human expression of intimacy. And I trust you." David took a deep breath, his mind racing with the implications. "This is a big step. We should only proceed if it's something we both genuinely want, beyond curiosity or research." Inara reached out, her hand hesitating in the air before David took it, squeezing reassuringly. "I want to understand you, not just as a human, but as a person. I've never felt this connection before." Moved by her words, David nodded. "And I you. Let's take this step together, then. Let's explore." They began tentatively, with David guiding her through the human customs of intimacy. First, they sat close, their sides touching. David spoke softly. "Usually, it starts with something simple, like holding hands. It's a way to show affection and comfort." Inara mirrored his actions, her touch gentle. They progressed slowly, exploring the nuances of human kissing, the gentle press of lips that was new to Inara but filled with an emotional depth she hadn't anticipated. David explained each step, and then, "If both feel comfortable, They might move to a more intimate embrace, like this. He demonstrated by wrapping his arms around her, pulling her gently against him. It's about sharing warmth and closeness. Inara's response was a mix of academic interest and personal engagement. I see. It's about mutual comfort and sharing personal space. Yes, exactly, David affirmed, feeling the boundaries of teacher and student blur into something more personal, more profound. As they moved together to the couch, the physical closeness sparked an emotional dialogue about what intimacy meant to each of them, revealing fears, desires, and the intrinsic human need for connection. It's strange, Inara mused, how actions so simple can evoke such complex emotions. David smiled, feeling the truth in her words resonate deeply. It's one of the beautiful things about being human. And I imagine, about being Illyrian too. Yes, Inara agreed, her eyes reflecting a mixture of emotions. To feel so much from so little. They continued their exploration, each movement and touch deepening their understanding of each other. The night grew deep, and the room was filled with soft sounds of mutual discovery. As they finally paused, sitting close, wrapped in a comfortable silence, David spoke. Thank you, Inara, for trusting me with this part of your journey. And thank you, David, for sharing it with me, Inara replied, her voice thick with emotion. The chapter of their exploration closed with a sense of mutual respect and a deeper connection, one that transcended cultural and personal boundaries, hinting at the potential of their evolving relationship. The morning after their intimate exploration, David and Inara met at a quiet, serene park on the planet. It was a place of contemplation, where the gentle rustling of leaves and the soft burble of a nearby stream provided a natural backdrop to their conversation. As they walked along a path lined with flowering plants, David broke the silence, his tone reflective. Last night was enlightening, he began, searching for the right words. I feel like we crossed a threshold, Inara. Inara nodded, her expression thoughtful. Yes, it was a significant step. I find myself processing a lot of emotions and thoughts. In my culture, what we shared is not just a physical act, it's a spiritual connection that binds individuals. David glanced at her, his curiosity piqued. Is that why you suggested it? To form a deeper bond? In part, Inara admitted. But also because I genuinely wanted to understand and experience those aspects of human emotion and connection. I've learned from you, not just about humans in general, but about personal feelings and bonds. They found a bench by the stream and sat down, watching the water flow over smooth stones. I've been thinking about the implications, David said. What this means for us moving forward. Inara turned to him, her gaze earnest. And what have you concluded? David sighed, a mix of apprehension and clarity in his voice. That I want to continue exploring this. Whatever this is between us. Not just for research or cultural exchange, but because I feel a genuine connection to you, Inara. Inara's lips curved into a soft smile. I share those feelings, David. What we experienced was profound, and I find myself drawn to you in a way that I had not anticipated. Their conversation turned to practical matters. We're from different worlds, Inara. Literally, David chuckled softly. What could a future look like for us? It's uncharted territory, Inara responded, her tone light yet serious. But my people say that the best journeys are those that take you into the unknown. Perhaps we could chart this course together, learning from each other, experiencing life together. David nodded, feeling a sense of adventure stir within him. It sounds daunting, but exciting. I'm willing if you are. I am, Inara confirmed, reaching out to take his hand, a gesture of human affection she had come to appreciate. Their conversation continued into the afternoon, discussing potential challenges and opportunities. They spoke about cultural differences, societal expectations, and logistical issues, like where they could live and how they would navigate their professional commitments. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows over the park, David felt a renewed sense of purpose. Today has been good, Inara. Talking about everything openly, it's cleared up a lot of doubts. Inara agreed, her voice warm. Openness is the foundation of trust. And I trust you, David, more than I've trusted anyone in a long time. They stood, ready to leave the park, their steps slow as they savored the final moments of peace. Let's take this one step at a time, David suggested. No need to rush. Agreed, Inara said. Let's see where this path leads us. Hand in hand, they walked back towards the city, each step forward a symbol of their commitment to explore not only the vast universe but also the depths of their own hearts. The interstellar departure terminal was bustling with activity, a symphony of farewells and greetings echoing through the vast space. David and Inara stood side by side, each lost in thought as they watched ships ascend into the cosmos. David broke the silence, his voice tinged with a hint of sadness. "It's strange, isn't it? How quickly time has passed since we first met here." Inara nodded, her eyes reflecting the starlit void beyond the terminal's panoramic windows. "Time does seem to behave differently when significant changes are unfolding." David turned to her, his expression serious. "Before I go, I need to know, what are your thoughts about coming with me to Earth? It's a big step, and I wouldn't want you to feel obligated." Inara smiled, a gesture that carried both warmth and resolve. "David, I've considered this carefully. My journey began as an academic pursuit, but it has grown into something much more personal. I want to continue this adventure, to learn more about your world, and to see where our relationship can go." David's face lit up with relief and excitement. "That's more than I could have hoped for, Inara. I promise, you'll have all my support. Earth will be different, but I think you'll find it fascinating." As they prepared to board the ship, Marcus appeared, rushing through the terminal with a broad grin. "I almost missed you too." David laughed. "It wouldn't be the same without your dramatic timing, Marcus." Marcus clapped David on the shoulder. "I wouldn't miss this for anything. Inara, you're about to embark on a great journey. Earth is incredible, and with David, you'll be in good hands." Inara thanked him, her tone sincere. "I am looking forward to it. And thank you, Marcus, for your friendship." The final boarding call echoed through the terminal, and the trio made their way to the gate. Marcus, ever the enthusiast, chatted animatedly about the potential discoveries Inara might make on Earth, from its natural wonders to its diverse cultures. As they reached the boarding area, David took Inara's hand. "Ready?" "As ready as I can be," Inara replied, her voice steady yet excited. They turned to Marcus for a final farewell. "Take care of her, David," Marcus said, his tone playful yet serious. "I will," David assured him, then turned to Inara with a smile. "Let's go show you Earth." With that, they stepped onto the ship, their hearts full of anticipation and curiosity. As the spacecraft detached from the terminal and began its ascent, Inara watched the planet she knew fade away, replaced by the vast, starry expanse. David watched her, seeing the wonder in her eyes. "What's on your mind?" Inara's voice was soft, almost awestruck. "I was just thinking about the infinite possibilities ahead of us. Not just for learning and exploration, but for us, together." David squeezed her hand, reassured and optimistic about their future. "Together," he echoed. "No matter what we find out there, we'll explore it as a team." The stars before them seemed to brighten, the universe itself opening up to welcome the intrepid couple as they sailed into the unknown, their journey bound by the promise of infinite discovery and the deep, uncharted waters of their growing love.